Hello and welcome to my channel Mains Gains. My name is Christian Quartermain and I am a student dietitian studying a master's degree at the University of Nottingham in dietetics and nutrition. I am also a qualified personal trainer alongside that. These videos I'm bringing to you is with the most up-to-date and relevant nutrition information as well as training information that hopefully you can apply to either your training goals or your healthy lifestyle goals. And with that all said, let's jump into today's video. And the content in today's video, you may have guessed it, it's a continuation with Metabolic Mondays. And in this series of Metabolic Mondays, we have been looking at key organs and their relationship with energy metabolism. This video specifically is looking at adipose tissue. Here are the contents for the two-part video on adipose tissue. Today we will be looking at first what and where is adipose tissue, followed by the adipose tissue's role in metabolism. In next week's video on part 2, we'll be looking at the impact this has on your body utilizing substrates, in brackets food. And finally, we'll be piecing all that information together and how we can apply it to your fitness goals or your health goals. And with that all said, let's jump into it. What and where is adipose tissue? Adipose tissue, simplifying, is body fat. It is where fat is stored in the body. And it is stored in the body in the form of triacylglycerol. Triacylglycerol is a glycerol molecule attached to 3 fatty acid tails. The reason fat is stored in this capacity is because when they are free, when these fatty acid tails are free, well, they're acidic, and too much acid can be harmful for the body. So instead, it reduces the acidic properties from the free fatty acid tails by attaching it to the glycerol molecule. Adipose tissue is the largest store of energy in the body. Obviously, everybody's individual with how much adipose tissue they have, but you think about it, you have adipose tissue in all places, so you can store a lot of energy in adipose tissue. There are different types of adipose tissue. So we have subcutaneous fat, which is the fat under the skin, so it's the fat we can pinch, and that is the fat we try and lose during a weight loss phase. We also have visceral fat, which is the fat that goes around internal organs, it's to protect internal organs. And finally, we have fat that can be stored between muscles, in bone marrow, and in breast tissue. The fat we have stored in between muscles is quite a small amount relative to obviously the amounts we store in adipose tissue. When we are exercising, let's say we're doing some endurance exercise like running, after about half an hour, we will start using some of this fat stored between our muscles, and we will also start mobilizing the fat we have stored in our adipose tissue to be used as energy. When fat is broken down from adipose tissue, what happens is obviously, as I said, it's stored as this tag, and it can't travel around the body as free fatty acids because, as we said, they're acidic. So it does mobilize and it'll take the fat from the adipose tissue and it'll be packaged in a way so that it can travel via the circulation in the body. It will then go to where it's needed, and then it'll be unpackaged, broken down, and that fat will be converted into energy for us to use during exercise. Adipose tissue's role in metabolism. So adipose tissue can carry out a metabolic process called lipolysis when the body requires energy. Lipolysis is the breaking down of fat by the release of fatty acids in adipose tissue. But as we discussed, when fat is being mobilized from adipose tissue to be used as energy, it first of all has to be broken down to be released from the adipose tissue, but then it has to be repackaged so it can then travel via the circulation. Then once it's got to where it's needed, it'll be broken down again, and that fat will be then converted into energy for us to use in the exercise that we are currently partaking. And to simplify lipolysis further, lipo is short for lipid, fat is a type of lipid, Lysis means breaking down. So we put that together, the breaking down of fat. Another metabolic process that can occur in the adipose tissue is lipogenesis. So it can convert carbohydrate to TAG. TAG is short for triglycerol through lipogenesis when the body receives an excess of energy, brackets calories. Lipogenesis, again, it's lipo is short for lipid, fat is a type of lipid. Genesis means formation, so if we put that together, it means the formation of fat. This process can take place in adipose tissue, it can also take place in the liver. So if you're in a calorie surplus, if you're consuming more calories than you're expending and you're having carbohydrate, what happens is if, first of all, the carbohydrate is broken down to glucose, the glucose is sent to the liver. Liver will store as much of that glucose as it can in the form of glycogen. Once it's full and can't store any more, the rest of that glucose will be sent off to the skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscle will then store as much of that glucose as it can in the form of glycogen. And once that's full, the rest of the broken down carbohydrate will be converted to TAG through lipogenesis, whether that takes place in the liver or it takes place in adipose tissue. Adipose tissue also releases hormones that influence the body's ability to regulate and use energy. There will be a lot more on hormones in a future series. So, adipose tissue actually secretes its own hormone called leptin. Leptin travels to the brain and sends all sorts of signals and messages, which then can have an influence on your metabolism and your psychology a little bit as well. But we will go into detail on that in a future series. The other thing I'll say about hormone regulation and fat is that fat is a solvent for certain vitamins. So vitamin A, D, E, and K dissolve in fat. And it's actually advised that you should try and have vitamins as close, these vitamins particularly, as close to a fatty meal as you can, because if you think about it, if you're having a fatty meal and then it gets all mushed up in the stomach, so that's digested. If you're having the vitamins that dissolve in fat, then if they're in there as well, they're going to dissolve easier, then they're going to be absorbed better by the body. And these vitamins all have their own purposes. It's all like kind of a recycling process, so they'll interact with other vitamins. So for example, vitamin C sort of interacts with something like selenium. So it's important that we all get a healthy amount of these nutrients and vitamins, and what's just as important is that we absorb these nutrients, and fat plays a role in that. There are other roles that lipids have beyond metabolism, such as protecting internal organs and making up membranes for cells. So if you think about the heart, for example, like our body is made up of millions of cells, and our heart is made up of cells. So those cells, if you imagine like a bubble, and inside the bubble we have little organs called organelles that all do a job, they all do a function. When we have nutrients, they are absorbed by cells to then be utilized, and those cells make up the tissue, and the tissue make up the organ. What lipids do, they make up the outer layer of the membrane that protects the cells, that allows nutrients in and out. So they do have an important function in protecting organs as well. Before we end the video, I would like to reiterate what I said at the end of the last slide about cells. And what I meant to say was that lipids make up the membrane of the cell. When I said outer layer, what I was trying to say was the barrier of the cell. So you have the organelles inside the cell and then the barrier of the cell. Lipids make up the barrier, the membrane. And the last thing I'm going to say on this video in part 1 of adipose tissue is consume some dietary fat. Dietary fat is good for you. There are some negative associations with dietary fat. High fatty diets can be associated with coronary heart disease and high cholesterol, but do not let that put you off having fat, because fat is good for you. We need some fat. Everybody's requirements are individual. For me, specifically, if I have anything less than 40 grams of fat, I feel terrible. I feel miserable, I'm depressed, I'm easily irritated, I'm angry. It's not a fun time. I should be having more than 40 grams. That's not me saying, oh, I'll have like 43 grams. I'm saying for me personally, my psychology, I know that if I have less than 40, I feel dreadful. And that's probably because things aren't being regulated properly or even efficiently by that point. So have fat. It has its roles, it has its functions, it's good for you, and enjoy it. And with that all said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate a like, and I'd also appreciate if you subscribed. But if not, I hope at some point, again, I'll see you in a future video and you'll enjoy that content there too. But for now, take care and enjoy the rest of your day.